Okay, thank you, Tom, Frank, and the NRP team for having me here. My name is Robert Twomey. I'm a faculty in computing and the arts here at UCSD and also a researcher with the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination here. But until very recently was working out at UNL with Derek Weitzel and some of the other NRP team. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, this will be pretty different, I think, from all the other talks. Maybe instead of a national data platform, I'll be talking about sort of personal data platforms, but going through a bit of the history and kind of both my history working with Nautilus and some of these tools, and also sort of where I see these kinds of resources fitting into both computational media, computing and the arts practice, and also into education. So I come through a kind of eclectic background as a painter and a biomedical engineer working in neuroimaging, game design, smart device design, pollution, sniffing dogs. But actually in 2019, 2020, started working with Larry Smar and on the Future Patient project, doing some data processing and visualization, interactive visualization for that project. And that's really when I was introduced to then the Pacific Research Platform and Jupyter Hub as a tool for computing, both scientific computing, but also artistic computing, you could say. So I'll say, if the title of this is AI, Computational Media, and Art, this is where I started with AI and computational media. About 20 years ago, learning about hidden Markov models and other kinds of language systems. I trained a chatbot on my grandmother who had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and built this interactive textual experience. The idea there was that the dysfunction of the system would be somehow descriptive of her state. And I'll think you'll see this kind of different ways of working with personal data that show up throughout here. But as I, through the work here with Larry, and also with this talk will sort of track the evolution of generative media over the past couple of years. So I started using Nautilus as a tool for, at the beginning, these clip-guided image generation. So using image generation models like StyleGAN, steering them with text, sort of predating DALL-E and some of these now the diffusion techniques that folks are using. So doing things like doing a performance where we have worked with a language model, in this case GPT-3, to do these different reflections on kind of the machine and the sublime. These are themes from art. And delivering these talks that were both kind of composed by machine, visualized by these text-to-image models that I was running on Nautilus, and thinking through ideas around sort of where do these generative systems fit in a human creative practice. At times, I've worked very explicitly with models as kind of generative models as an analogy for human imagination. So this project, three-stage drawing transfer, was trained on a corpus of children's drawings from a Bay Area child art researcher named Rhoda Kellogg. Here you're seeing a walk through this latent space of this model trained on Nautilus. I'll have a lot of Nautilus plugs. But the idea here was to think about sort of what would a machine, what's similar or different about a machine imagination in relation to our human imagination. The result was both an interactive performance where my 5-year-old son was doing these collaborative drawings with a co-robotic arm, so kind of sampled from the imaginative space of the GAN, but also an interactive piece so this was at SIGGRAPH in 2022, where where audience members or viewers could have this kind of one-to-one relationship with this machine imagination. So my practice in different ways has worked through some kind of data collection and data analysis workflows. So both kind of a machine perception and also a machine imagination or generative AI. For my dissertation, I built this multimodal sensing system in the home, so documenting over a period of months, the inhabitants of the place, both like visually, sonically, physically, and then producing these different artifacts out of that. So a lot of these analyses are running in, just simple like data science, computer vision workflows running in Jupyter notebooks, but using it was interesting actually seeing about those derived streams in the National Data Platform, but thinking about sort of how do you extract features and what features are meaningfully descriptive of the narratives or the activities that happen in these very human spaces. So I produced things such as, drawings that become, records of inhabitants in different ways, or even thinking more recently about generating sort of fictional views of these domestic spaces. So training models on these stacks of images that I collected over a period of months. More recently, I've been working with robotics in different ways, and actually we got some of the NVIDIA Isaac Sim running on Nautilus. I'm interested in exploring that for kind of real-time robot control, so using Isaac Sim as the inverse kinematics for like a vision-driven interaction. It's kind of a one-to-one human interaction. This robotic arm had a camera and was interacting with the performer Hortense Girardot, actually next door in the Black Box Theater back in last April, for a performance that was kind of exploring ideas of machine intelligence and embodiment. And you can probably see my background as a painter that these things still, I still have this interest in kind of visually, how are the outputs of these systems, similar or different from kind of the history of images that humans have made, things that exist between a photograph and a video, right? So these were text-guided image generations, which I used as backdrops for this project. How do things exist sort of between photographs and videos? And also just as humans, how do we read these images, with all of their kind of glitches and surreality present? Here's a view of Isaac Sim. We never quite got the real-time joint control streaming from like Nautilus nodes, but that's something that I remain interested in. More recently, I don't know if anyone in here does robotics, but I've been exploring this Genesis embodied AI system. So we're simulating some of the movement of these robot arms. So that's kind of a sense of some of the ways that I've used Nautilus and approached these server-based or cloud-based computing in the arts practice. I thought I'd also show you some things from student work, so from kind of the education side. So since about 2019, I've been teaching a machine learning for the arts course, originally here in the electrical engineering department at Nebraska, now back here. And the entry point to sort of AI or generative AI for this is always in terms of text. And I think, if we think about humans prompting machines a lot these days, I think the texts, my students would often take the outputs of, they'd go through kind of a model, like a test training exercise, running something like a GPT-2 at the time locally, fine-tuning it on some data set of their choice, and then maybe taking the outputs of that as prompts for humans. So doing things like, training a GPT transformer model on descriptions of cats, generating outputs, including all of their quirks like repeating fuzzy, 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 15 times, and then using that as a prompt for kind of the human illustration. Or here, finding a corpus of fashion advice from style magazines, training the model, and then sort of cherry picking examples to demonstrate out of that. More recently, students have moved into using, I'll show some videos, into stable diffusion, video generation of various kinds. So we've often, it's been interesting with Nautilus and with other, at UCSD, we had the data science machine learning platform. There's Google Colab, these other places to run Jupyter in different ways. It's always interesting to see sort of like when students transition into wanting to kind of continue, working with Nautilus or using those kinds of tools. usually towards the end of a course. But here a project from student Micah Fullenfaw from UNL. So he keeps a dream journal, and the assignment, I think, was a generative image assignment. And so what he did was he worked with this stable diffusion instance that I think Derek might be in the room somewhere. Derek, yes, Derek, helped us set up. But using stable diffusion, so like a text prompted image generation to produce these representations of his dreams. He's also a graffiti artist, so he asked for all of his images in terms of painted graffiti on a wall depicting this dream, a monkey doing perfect sign language. So that's like kind of a notable, moment from his dream journal. Produced these photorealistic, images. He's not sharing with us kind of the text code or the source for all of these, right? That, we know they're derived from the 150-something dreams that he transcribed and prompted the model with. But so he then assembled this painting that kind of collaged all these images together. I shared the link with Tom if anyone wants to watch, to the slides, if anyone wants to watch these videos outside of the talk. But you can get a sense of sort of his process here. Oh, I will say one thing. This is funny. This is a 90s grunge rock song composed by the music generation service Suno. The title is The Concrete Jungle, and the project's called Tag the Subconscious. Say students are super excited about these tools. We hosted a kind of data science workshop the other year, and they have a lot of ethical concerns as artists, especially about where training data is coming from, what kind of control they have over the models they're using, things like that. So I think artists in some ways are really well positioned to push some of these questions around how we use generative media. Just to wrap up a few final things. So a few more examples. We've hosted an AI film hackathon for the past 3 years. This is kind of like, you think like a 24-hour film festival where you give students a prompt. In this case, we'd do a one-day thing, so they'd have 9 hours to kind of make a short film. We would generally do a few workshops in advance of that. So we'll do things like we did a stable diffusion workshop, where we're taking people through this stable diffusion, this automatic 1111 instance on Nautilus. We start with just kind of talking about prompting in text and how writing with text relates to writing as a human relates to kind of co-writing with a machine. Students, find some entry points in terms of text. Like that's a really easy way for people to get started. This film, Intrusive Thoughts, which came out of the film festival, is basically sort of a therapist talking to a client.
They have not talked to me since.
Yeah, I see. That is a hard situation.
So all the action is occurring like in conversation, through the text. The big reveal, spoiler alert, at the end here is that the character that has come in for therapy is a language model running on a laptop. It's pretty good. Excuse me. In the interest of time, I won't screen all of these, but so students kind of like, I feel like they gravitate towards working with text as a medium for kind of exploring, interfacing with these generative systems. More recently, I'll show you. So we like I said, we've had students getting into the stable diffusion. Tom, what was the prompt that you like to do to test a photo generation? Oh, never mind. We could talk later. But okay. So, so stable diffusion has been, the award-winning film from our festival this past spring. The qualities that make it a good film, I'd say, are really just kind of experimental film qualities. It's like editing and composition. Artists really are kind of like bricoleurs. They grab a hodgepodge of tools. So here we're seeing a mix of depth from image tools that are running on a fee-for-service platform called Runway ML. These generative sequences were all generated with that stable diffusion instance running on Nautilus. But here they were experimenting with a deep fake library, which sort of partially trained. But the kind of the key creative contribution here, right, is the work that the students themselves are doing and kind of envisioning, deciding on content, editing, sound. And in terms of that sort of art history and the kinds of images that we see now, I think these, you see this like aesthetic that's arriving of these, amorphous images, this kind of surreal collisions, unexpected movements. So I'll just skip ahead in the interest of time here to, yes, oh, actually I'm at the end. So just very, very fresh work. So just last week, I did a performance with a group with the Nebraska Public Media. This coincided with the launch of the Leonardo da Vinci documentary from Ken Burns. So we screened a little bit of the documentary and did an hour-long radio performance, kind of a live radio theater. This is a practice that my collaborator and I have done for the past, since about 2020. So co-writing with AI, doing these workshops that culminate in a broadcast of a radio performance. People say radio is, perversely a very visual medium, right? Like through the spoken word, people really do a lot of kind of visual imaginary. We did a stage production where you see this whole apparatus of the radio troupe. We had live musicians, some kinds of live compositing. We did one of our workshops with members of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. So this was kind of, they co-wrote a section of our performance. And just, I guess the last point here is we used a lot of generative visuals and other generative techniques in this project, but there's really this, in terms of kind of trade-offs and what it means to be an artist working with these tools. I think artists really gravitate towards open source tools, towards tools where they can train them, they can have some insight into what they're doing, how they're running. At the same time, the kind of most state-of-the-art, in this case, text-guided generation of video here is from commercial provider Runway ML. So there's always this kind of tension, I think, for artists, and to really use the capabilities of some of the infrastructure like Nautilus. We need to find these open source tools or tools that we can run on that infrastructure. These are all visuals kind of derived from Da Vinci's interest in fluids, feathers, and flight that we used as part of this performance just last Thursday. So to wrap it up, I'll say, I had a slide of conclusions. Tom sent this to me this morning. I thought it was a good way to end. So the Copyright Office, US Copyright Office, issued its second part of a three-part set of guidelines for copyright and AI. And I like this sentiment. The key to copyrightability, the report finds, is human creativity. And it's, it's interesting. It's sort of, if you're using these systems as a tool, if you just ask them for a thing, I think it's a blurry line, right? Like sort of where's the human creativity in this usage? But that just as a camera is a tool, a paintbrush is a tool, these generative models are tools in different ways. And the idea of copyrightability sort of comes down to arguing about whether the use was what the human is bringing in terms of creative use. Yeah, I'll just leave it there. I know we're kind of at time, but thank you very much, and yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so the thing that actually addresses your last point, and also you asked before, so I was fooling around with Dave Warner. Oh, it's got to go on? Find the button.
You just turned the mic
Okay. So I was fooling around with Dave Warner, and I wanted him, using Stable Diffusion or something, wanted to come up with an image of a bald Moses. You know, we all think what Moses looks like, but I want Moses with no hair on the top of his head. Could not do it. I mean, could not even get close to it. Now, I would maintain that my prompt engineering of doing that, and in this article it says, well, if you're just doing prompts, that's not copyrightable, right? But I think if you're doing creative prompts, it should be. So there's, like you said, there's a line there, and it's fun to cross that line. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That one of the points I was going to make in the conclusions also is that, you know, a question for me as an artist and for my students is like, what, you know, are these generative models like ultimately normative? And I find myself pretty bored with a lot of the outputs of some of the visual, like image generation systems, because they're pretty cliched and kind of cheesy, and it kind of makes sense, you know, if they're training on large data sets. And what you're describing, Tom, is also this idea of creative misuse, you know, which is very much kind of an artistic ethos and trying to like get it to do something it's not trained to do. So, thank you.